I am Donald Bohr, Chair of the Dance NYC Junior Committee. Welcome to Conversations about the Future of Dance in America. Although this panel is at lunchtime, unfortunately we cannot have food eaten in the room, as I've been told. Please eat. It's fine. I've just gotten word it's fine to eat. As you can tell, the theater is very full this morning. To accommodate overflow, we are simulcasting this session in Studio B. If there's anything we can do to make this experience more enjoyable for you, please find a Dance NYC staff member in the black I Am a New Yorker for Dance t-shirts. We invite you to download our Symposium app, which can help you plan your day, connect with attendees, and participate in live polling. Search and download Hello Crowd from your phone's app store and select Dance NYC 27 Symposium. In your tote bag, you will also find several cards that asks you for suggestions for the NYC Cultural Plan. Throughout the day, as you navigate sessions and have ideas, please write them on your card and deposit them in any of the boxes throughout the venue or give them to any of the volunteers in the black t-shirts. As a friendly reminder, you're on camera. Sessions are filmed and photographed for archival purposes. This is also why we ask participants asking questions to use the microphone. If you do not wish to be captured, please sit in the no photography area of every room, which can be found in the back row. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Gina Gibney, Artistic Director and CEO of Gibney Dance, and Lane Harwell, Executive Director of Dance NYC.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are, and everyone here, and everyone that is now joined us by live stream. Welcome. I'm Lane Harwell, Executive Director of Dance NYC. I just wanted to give Gina Gibney an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what she's doing in the technology space as we enter the online world, and welcome our wonderful guests today. Thank you again.
Okay. I think that'll work. First of all, I have to say that having operated at least one dance studio since 1991 and seen dancers running in from rehearsal, I know that you cannot not have food in dance studios. So please feel free to eat your lunch and enjoy it. And thank you, Lane, and welcome to all of you. We're just really delighted to once again be hosting the Dance NYC Symposium. And I'm actually really excited to be expanding the definition of hosting through the use of technology. Here at Gibney Dance, we are really proud to have received a 3-year grant from the Sherman Foundation's Rosine Fund for a digital technology initiative, and we're halfway through that. Our goal is to put a human face on technology, to eliminate all of those barriers to participation, and to activate innovative programming and art tech connectors, really kind of art geniuses who infiltrate the studios, the convening spaces, the theaters, the classrooms, to put that human face on technology and to bring skills to our dancers. This support allows us to leverage an incredibly generous gift from the city for equipment at 280 Broadway. And after about 3 years of waiting, I'm really happy to say that the equipment is arriving. So we have lighting equipment, we have cameras, we have software, we have editing equipment, all available at no cost to the artists. So this is a great example, the Sherman Foundation and the city working together to advance our field, removing barriers to access and enabling artists to actively use technology to advance and disseminate our work. So in this spirit of openness to the many, many ways that technology can advance the field, I'm really pleased to introduce this live stream conversation about the future of dance in America with Afa Dworkin, President and Artistic Director of Sphinx Organization, and Damien Wetzel, Producer, Director, Arts Advocate, and New York City Principal Dancer, New York City Ballet Principal Dancer. Welcome, Afa and Damien.
Thank you, Gina. It's an honor to be in your space and with you, and thank you for everything you do. You make dance and the field of dance look good in so many ways. So it's a pleasure to be here for this with my friend Afa, who we've worked together for a number of years on issues of dance, music, and education. My mic is going in and out, so I'm just going to talk a little bit loudly. But what we thought we'd do to start is let's do a little dance and music, because we've heard some amazing things today, but I feel like we haven't actually, we've been moved, but we haven't moved. So we're going to do a little bit of Balanchine and a little bit of Tchaikovsky, the Serenade for Strings. And so those of you who would, please join us. Those of you who are differently abled, please stay with us for this seated, and we're going to teach you the beginning of Serenade. So the first thing you have to imagine is that we're actually outside, and you're standing, and the sun is shining so brightly from that direction that you raise your right hand. That's right. So the sun is shining, and it's just shielding your eyes, but then the sun is shining so brightly that you start to get a bit of a headache, and you bring that hand very slowly to the side of your head, right to your temple. Excellent. Excellent. And then, because we are part of a movement, we start to feel moved, and we place our hand over our heart. And because we believe in dance, we start to take form, and we lower our hands to a low position. And then, on cue, you start to become dancers by turning out your feet or your hands, if that's what you can do today, to first position. And then you're going to open out your arms and your right leg. Close to fifth position. And prepare to dance. Okay, so walk through it. The sun to the side of the head. To your heart, low arms, feet, arms and leg, and prepare to dance. So beautiful. Can we have music? Arms up, and you just hold for the first section. You can feel the breeze as the curtain has gone up, blows your hair back just a little bit. Serenade, George Balanchine, Tchaikovsky, 1934. And I thought it was a good place to start. Let me get one more mic here. Thought it was a good place to start because it's a beginning. It's a beginning in that it's the first ballet that Balanchine made in America. He had arrived, brought by Lincoln Kirstein, to what, in his mind, create ballet in America. Of course, there already was dance in America, but it was such a formative time for dance, for ballet, and it was the beginning of when I look back on it, of certainly what came to me as a ballet dancer. So when we thought we're going to talk about the future of dance. I thought let's start with Serenade, and I always just love to make sure that everybody stands up and partakes. So, Afo, I thought we'd also just start by talking about music and dance together, because there is one without the other in my mind does not exist. And our work has centered around access, certainly, about giving the opportunity for music and for dance to be shared by everybody. And maybe you could give us some of your perspective just to start on that need, first of all, why that has to be juiced to some extent. Why is that? And then we can tell you a little bit more about Sphinx in the process so that everybody knows exactly, how you come to this.
Sure. It is a true honor to be here in this space, literally, with so many artists and teaching artists and citizen artists, and talk about what the role that our art form and performing arts in general play in our society. I'm fortunate to have my work be centered around the intersection of social justice and the arts, and specifically classical music. Sphinx, throughout the year, looks at the issues of diversity and inclusion, kind of throughout the notion of a pipeline from the very beginning to the arts leadership level. And the importance of access for me has to do quite simply with the notion of having the art form not only survive but thrive. In that I'm pretty convinced, and I imagine that this is a like-minded crowd, that for our art form to survive, it needs to be reflective of the community that it serves. And absent of that, it's robbed of the richness and creativity and contributions that different voices bring to our art form. And when it is not reflective, it'll perish. And because of that, I feel that it is we all, individually and collectively, have to do everything in our power to ensure access. And as our mutual friend Yo-Yo Ma said, talent doesn't pick demographics. So talent is everywhere, and that's the great thing about it. And that bringing the arts into every possible space, every possible corner, making it accessible, and removing every imaginable barrier is really kind of my personal credo, and I imagine that we all share it.
So I would follow on that by saying that the future of dance is the future of the arts. And I actually, if I had to actually put a button on it, I'd say, and I am optimistic. I am optimistic about both dance and the arts for a few reasons. Because I tend to look at things, I tend to get very involved on a micro level on something, the creation of something, the working on something, and then I maybe take a step back and go, where are we in context? And contextually, we can look throughout the history of dance and music in America, and we can see times when there's what we call the dance boom. There was all this interest in dance, and then we can see times when it's not so present, and similarly with music. And I'm really talking about all dance and all music. I may be a specialist. I have a specialty that I came from the world of ballet, but I work across the board in dance now. And similarly, music, you may be most concerned in some moments about the makeup of symphony orchestras, but you are talking about music writ large as a part of something larger. So it's in that spirit that I say I am optimistic, because I feel that there is a push and a flow of energy in this country right now. It comes from places that are not attractive and that are bad, and come from like my wearing a button that says persist. But it is about the idea that there is an energy in community, and we all have to be in things together. And there is nothing that brings us together like the arts. There is nothing that brings us together like dancing as one group. I was at Michelle Dorrance's great show with Toshi Reagan and Big Lovely last fall. And a question, someone asked, how do you do now in this moment? And Toshi said, we do by coming together and being in the same place and breathing together and finding like-minded energy. And I think that that's what we have. I was shocked, frankly, at some of the statistics I heard earlier about education. I want to drill down on some of those at some point, with various people here. But one of the things I thought was interesting was that theater was less than dance. And I find myself getting a ton of energy from theater right now. A ton of energy for the things that the places like the Public Theater are doing. They're interrogating their own forms. They are finding ways to actually be a part of what I'm describing. And I think that if we in the dance world similarly harness that kind of energy, I mean, people like Gina who have been doing it, who are the history is so rich with this, but it's it's in our DNA. And that is optimistic. There is so much to do that we can do. And it goes well beyond issues of, one little piece, or there's no ideological purity to it. It's actually about energy. I think that, interestingly enough, my first experiences with you and your husband, Aaron, co-founder of Sphinx, we were in a school. We were in Chicago, in a school, doing what Yo-Yo and I call an art strike, which is essentially Yo-Yo and I were going through town, doing what we were doing, and before we went to the airport, we made sure that we stopped somewhere and did some public service. Simple, simple, simple. And then we thought, who else is in town? Turned out, Aaron was in town. So Aaron came along, and he brought Gabriel Cabezas,
Yes.
young cellist from your program, who's now in Y Music and other things. He's fantastic.
It's terrific.
And Little Buck was there, and we went for 3 hours to this school at Tel Pachkali, and we put on an art strike, and we did what we could do. And it simply was an extension of what we do already, but the word I was going to throw back at you to what you said was, frankly, it was entrepreneurial. It was a moment like where you could do something, so you kind of twist it a little bit and make it happen. And I always think that we have that. Artistic habit of mind is all about that. And it's simply about taking a step back occasionally and saying, where's my entry point? Where's my entry point? Do you find that, like, with the musicians as they grow, to be in their DNA as well in that way? I mean, there's this kind of, we have this push and pull about the years when we focus on becoming excellent, and perhaps then where we back off and say, oh, wait, what am I going to use this for beyond being excellent? Maybe we could talk about that a little.
I think I found more and more with our students, and we work with students who are as young as 7 and 8 years old to kind of well into their 30s and 40s when folks are pursuing kind of the heights of professional careers. I see actually one of the more recent questionnaires we've done with our entire alumni body of 600. I'm seeing a notable interest in entrepreneurship, and I think the way that it's now being defined aligns closely with the approach to portfolio careers, hybrid careers, whereas in the past, we have these outdated notions of if you're not in the orchestra, if you're not sitting, in one of the principal chairs, then you're in our world. You're not really successful, or if you're not in a full-time symphony, if you're not pursuing your DMA so that you can then give back and teach at a conservatory, you're not really successful. But I think the notion of success has really shifted, luckily. And I think because that means such a flexible thing now, and because we're also dealing with a generation of folks who see entrepreneurship as a way to survive as well, and bend their careers to encompass a variety of things they may or may not have thought about in the past, I think what it's doing is it's creating new timbres of creative voices that we didn't even know were out there. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I get that. And I feel like that's a cyclical issue as well, about the times when we are globalists, if you will, kind of looking for all of these different ways to focus, and then the times when we narrow our focus and we work exclusively. I certainly, in my time as a ballet dancer, went through all of those stages, and I watched my company go through those stages to a point where, certainly when I joined New York City Ballet, it was 1985. Mr. Balanchine had passed away only in 1983. His presence was very much there in the people who were part of the company in all ways. And I should point out, too, right here, my wife Heather Watts and Susie Gluck right there as well. And we had Jerry Robbins around, very much around, making us aware of, genius in the house type situation. But already there was a thing going on. Dancers started to go to school on Mondays, on the day off. It was unthinkable before that. Susie and I, we were there Monday at Fordham, remember? And I couldn't quite do it, frankly. I was too focused at that moment narrowly. I went back to it later, found my time. Now, the young dancers are doing everything.
Yeah.
They are intersecting in so many ways. It reminds me a little bit of what the history that I love and I read about from the 40s and 50s when dancers were on Broadway. They were doing vaudeville. They were trying to make a ballet in this room. They were working with musicians. And in the modern dance world, the things that were going on were so incredibly vibrant and entrepreneurial, like figuring it out, how to do it, how to make better art at every moment that you could. And so that's, again, I come back to that kind of focus on how do we do something for this time that fits into that energy that has all of those skills. And it certainly has to do with widening the base
Yes.
of who has access to do these things, who makes the rules in some ways. What are those rules for now? But I also thought that one thing that I'm fascinated by right now, and it comes from my own work, and I want to hear what you have to say, is I feel a decided shift to the local right now. And maybe it's because of what we're dealing with on the national level, but it's also a time in some way. I started coming to this some years ago with the work I was doing with street dance. And I would see that these dialects were happening locally, obviously. So Little Buck, who I work with, comes from Memphis, and he was dancing Memphis Jukin, and it is specific to Memphis. It's related in a way to footworking in Chicago, but it's quite different. There's a different bounce, and there's a different tempo, and there's difference between that and the JIT in Detroit, where we went and met with the guy from the Detroit JIT, and I was like, my mind is being blown by these dances that are growing. And they are, in a sense, the mazurkas and polonaises and all those things that I had in my training, but they are now for this moment. And watching those things develop on a local level has given me an incredible amount of energy personally. How does that square with what's going on
I
with
think
musical training?
there's some resonance with that, and yet as much there's also inclusion of, or maybe just relevance of what we might be honing into as artists locally, and how much global resonance and relevance there is. In the recent month, we had a large global gathering in Detroit, the Mecca of the arts, that's dedicated to kind of that cross-section of social justice in the arts, and talking all about inclusion and what inclusion means today, and why is that even relevant for the arts, and how's that helping us survive. And there were, in some ways, I see what you mean about local, in that our individual communities are tapping into the needs in our own backyard. I do see more efforts popping up in our world. It's a lot of El Sistema-inspired programs in Detroit, elsewhere. Our local orchestras are extending and reaching out and wanting to do more for the schools, since they have less and less, seemingly. Unfortunately, that's not a localized problem. But at the same time, these problems are strikingly and in an uncanny way very, very similar to some of the stories we're hearing from our colleagues in France and Berlin. We had a whole across the pond global section to our convening, and in many ways, while there is a rise to that attention to what's going on locally and that inspiration, I think at the same time it's not so different than what's happening elsewhere. And in that way, I think it's also crossing, it sort of relates to our previous point about entrepreneurialism and how that, what place it finds in the arts throughout, in that, yes, we have kind of, there's richness to some of these local traditions, and there's a lot to do in our own backyard, but at the same time, we're erasing this, I think, outdated notion to stick to narrow specialty and say, I'm only ballet, I'm only classical music, and I only play the violin. One of the ways in which I was recently inspired, one of our alumni was actually making a point during the convening, saying that we talk about entrepreneurship and this global citizenship through the arts as though that's something new. But it really isn't, right? Mozart was a hustler too. I mean, he combined a bunch of careers too. And it was just that we conveniently forget. And as somebody who didn't grow up in this country, to me, the whole, the stick-to-itiveness to excellence and narrow specialty is very, very narrow. It's limiting and it's scary. So I love the fact that we're kind of redefining things, and what we're wanting to do is go to places that give us energy and build new channels to give back, because now more than ever, we need that.
I agree with that entirely. I mean, and thinking further a little bit about that ebb and flow of narrow and large, that's a decision-making process. Those are moments when we all make choices. There are choices to be made, and it's about what's in front of you and how you handle that. It's actually, to my mind, it's like having a pluralistic attitude. It's like, do you have a pluralistic attitude about what you are doing? It doesn't take away the fact that there are constants. And that's kind of that tension. I mean, I was thinking about, while you were talking, I was thinking about some of the, it's all struggle.
Yeah.
It's all struggle in a way, convincing. Will they come? Will people enjoy this? Will the student actually understand what I'm trying to say to them? Am I an artist who can actually communicate? I mean, it's constant, dialectical kind of process of can this work, that keeps going. And that influences all of our choices. And it's how we approach them, I think, that will make the difference in what we get out of it. I think that, when you think about kind of the things that are going on socially on the large scale, one of the things I've been most concerned about in the last few days, there's so many, but one of them is truth, just the idea of truth. And where is culture in that? How are we representing truth? And I would argue that truth, literally, you just did truth. Held your arms open long enough that it sunk in and it was true. And that is an aesthetic and it is an ethic, and I think it matters just as much as holding a whole note that is not sharp or flat is truth, and making clear that is a position. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's actually a position, just like, it's because it's work. One of the things I know we've talked about before is that, we all, and this is again like-minded, now we can all just be in complete chorus and say, arts are hard work. Arts are hard work. We know that. It is not nice. It is not pretty. It is actually work. When a child starts to try and dance, or starts to try and actually make a dance, or write a piece of music, or perform in a theater piece, it is hard work. None of it is easy, and it pays off. That is why there's dividends. That's not to say that there isn't love and nurturing and all of that, but we have to recognize our strength. I really think that. And when we think about things that are problematic on the large scale, we have a strength, and we have an ability to intersect with it. I think about, and it's all flawed. Again, purity test, it's all flawed. People are not perfect, but, West Side Story changed a lot. Mm. Just doing that, understanding that there was tensions that could be depicted and could be, brought into people's homes on record albums, and it all is possible. I think about Agon, Balanchine with Arthur Mitchell and Diana Adams in 1957, while little kids are being thrown rocks at, little African-American girls in Arkansas, and he's putting on that on the stage. There is an opportunity at every moment to be a part of something that matters. And I think that's what's going to make it work.
Yeah.
In the end.
Absolutely. I think truth to me touches on a couple of aspects, and I think that is probably one of the areas where I find hope today within the world of the arts, in that it touches on not only hard work, but also authenticity and openness. And when I think, I was kind of, it moved me to think about a recent example in our own work at Sphinx, in response to some of the kind of now much politicized issue of police brutality. Sphinx was thinking about 6 months ago what we can do without going political, because we can't, but at the same time taking a stand and putting the truth out there through an expressive mode, not in a manner that is divisive, because we don't need any more division in our world, but in a manner that still confronts what is not right and celebrates what is and what is it that we aspire to. So we worked with a composer, a young African-American composer who's based in Atlanta, who conceived of a work called 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. And it essentially celebrates the lives of 7 African-American men who lost their lives prematurely and tragically to police brutality. It's looking at a couple of decades of these tragedies and literally records the 7 last words that these men spoke last. And what we did is we worked with the composer to put it together with a men's glee club from the University of Michigan and the full Sphinx Symphony. And while at the time I was so inspired to work with the composer and the creative director for this project because of how raw and true it felt, at the same time, particularly more so after November, we began to wonder, just exactly how many risks am I personally subjecting the organization to? And are we thinking about politicizing something that's already pretty raw? And in fact, is that harmful at that stage? So we had to take some time and talk within our community amongst our trustees and some creative voices from our alumni and my leadership team to really decide. And it wasn't all in unison. And I think that's kind of the beauty of truth and how we respond. And of course, in the end, after some thought and consult, we ended up putting the work on. It was probably one of the most moving artistic experiences for me of my entire life. There were 2,000 in the hall at Orchestra Hall in Detroit, our kind of long-term partner, who knew about it. And I think what stands out to me within that whole experience, not only was it so moving, so relevant, and so time-specific and much needed, I had a conversation with the deputy chief of police in Detroit because I wanted that extension of community support. And I wanted their thoughts. First of all, I didn't want them to feel blindsided that it's just going to appear on stage and then be televised. And I was so moved by how authentic and stoic that conversation was, because one thing that they said is that, yes, certainly this is it's a difficult topic, it's complicated, it's not simple, and you definitely wonder when the arts are supposed to reach out and do a little more, and when it's actually best to step back and process more. But one thing that I heard from them was that truth matters. And what better than the arts? What entity better than the arts? Speak to, sing about, literally, and kind of not only romanticize, but confront what happens, and in fact, find a way to unite people.
Absolutely. I mean, that brings me to a place where I'm thinking about, again, the choices, and we all have. I mean, we've heard about space, and there's going to be more, I think, a specific conversation about space, and Jody Arnhold spoke about the cultural hub that a school can and should be. And that idea of an education for all, that a school is a cultural hub for all, for the kids, for the families, for the community to take part in, is the ultimate kind of nirvana. I mean, it's just so beautiful. It's exactly what we should have. But you can take that, again, one more space. You talked about your partners in Detroit, where you do what you do. We all have space of our own kind, and how we choose to use it really matters. And I think that's, again, a particular to this time. I mean, I've watched, when I arrived at Lincoln Center, it was the Lincoln Center they were described a few years ago. It's closed. It's like not allowing people in. It's all like this. And then they renovated it. Now it's open and everybody's in. Sort of.
Almost everybody.
So that's a longer conversation. But it's an opportunity built of this time. That thinking, though, that led to that renovation of Lincoln Center. It led from somewhere. The aesthetic changed. It wasn't Philip Johnson and walls that were built that were about what's going on inside completely. That peak of development that was, which it really was. It was a steady peak, just building and building and building to that place. But it was, in the end, exclusionary and not open and not a part of what we were trying, what we grew to. Frankly, we grew to it. Grew to this place of justice or aspiration for justice, just if only. So I think about that in terms of all the spaces that I see coming around in New York City. I mean, I go to the Signature, and I am just thrilled. I am seeing a great work of art for very little money, and I'm out front, and I'm able to have a cup of coffee, and there's a musician playing, and there's people talking, and it is just, that's heaven. This is like how it should be. And there's more, and they want to do more. They want to do more. They're like constantly like, what else can we do with this thing? This is a great car. We have to think about all of our cars and how we can drive them. I mean, I think that's a huge opportunity and a responsibility for all of us, whatever it is we do. Again, it's entrepreneurial. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think entrepreneurial, I think a lot of the concepts we're talking about here relate. We're talking about grit and hard work and excellence and flexibility and forward thinking and removing barriers. And then I think ultimately we're talking about moving forward, right? Because there's always the forward, there's always the next step. And I think we're now at a particular time, it's filled with opportunity. That's probably the most exciting thing for me. I'm learning a ton from our young people, from our leaders, learning from being in this space and learning about what is to come. And I think the most exciting and scary and sometimes uncomfortable space of that learning is actively soliciting and inviting opposing voices. Because we always say, and I know in our world too, okay, so we're all artists, and it's kind of unlikely to find opposing voices, particularly so as we respond to some of the societal changes that we're experiencing. While that's understandable, at the same time, history shows that without the act of solicitation, of learning from opposing voices and including everyone and anyone whose ideals may or may not be in consonance with ours, without that, next steps in progress is actually rather difficult. We may be going in circles. And I think this is a time of learning for all of us and for opportunity. So as uncomfortable and as odd and politically incorrect it might be, I think it's also the opportunity to expand that, broaden. And the arts can do that more and better than I think a lot of other disciplines.
I agree. I think that there are other examples. There's one I'm thinking of, as you described, your project called Antigone and Ferguson. You may have seen, they did a special about it on PBS. This is a group led by a guy named Brian Derries, which does ancient work in for contemporary purpose. He repurposed performances of Ajax for PTSD, for instance. And then after the tragedy in Ferguson and then so many others, he repurposed Antigone specifically about, if those of you may recall, Antigone, the story is about a body that is left and it is not buried, and about Michael Brown's body laying in the street for all of that time. And he thought, let's put on Antigone and follow it with a discussion with all aspects, including the police, including the community leaders, including the family, in an effort to actually have those voices heard. And it's been remarkably successful. And he brought it to Baltimore last month, and it's something that, is a model of a way, to spur a conversation that absolutely needs to happen. Yeah. I think we want to do Q&A. I see we're getting down there. But one last thing I wanted to just maybe we talk about briefly is the idea of kind of supply and demand in terms of the field, whether it's dance or music or the arts writ large, is something that I've always been interested in, kind of just from a sociological point of view. How do you get there? How do And so, Jody, you talk so much about building the dance teacher repository, and you make it happen, and it is changing both the supply and the demand. Mm-hmm. And that's what has to happen. Both of those measures are going up because of that extraordinary work. And every teacher does that. Any teacher in this room knows what that is in the room, hand on hand. But it's also about audience, and it's about the audience's understanding of what they see. And I find that particularly interesting right now. We can't get into this deeply in any way, and nor should we, but what is written about dance or what is not written about dance? What is understood and what is not understood? What is the space? What is the news hole for dance now compared to at other times? What types of stories actually, and they know what people read because they know what people read now. It's not, if you click on it, they're keeping track. Yes. So you can pretend, there should be all of this, but nobody's reading it. That's why it's not there. Or maybe, I don't know, we have to look at it really closely. But that idea of knowledge breeding better work is what I'm getting at. If someone knows something more, they demand something more. Mm-hmm. And I love that idea, that's part of our mission, all of us, is to promote better work. Yeah. All kinds of better work in all kinds of ways, and that demands knowledge.
Absolutely. I think it resonates well throughout kind of the performing arts. I think that quest for excellence, better work, should be something that not only the artists or educators or funders aspire to, but also audience members. To me, I guess the way I see this is that the denominations of what is an audience member versus what is a teaching artist or who is an artist themselves, they're going to get erased more and more. And I think it's becoming flat already. Look at all of us here. So if everyone does strive, because while we talk about the cosmopolitan value of the arts and entrepreneurialism and kind of the broader definitions and pushing the boundaries, we don't lessen the commitment to excellence. So better work, I think I agree, it will.
It comes back
In
a little bit
fact.
to that idea of purity. I mean, my own work is so built on principles of collaboration. It literally is all about that idea that of finding some next step of collaboration that will lead to something that is different or enhanced, and it doesn't always work, and that's okay. That we find a way to find a little bit more of a thing, and I think that's all of us. I think that's the spirit, frankly, of a day like today. But I think that that's a word I wanted to just mention, you know, because it hadn't gotten said. But that idea of collaboration brought you and I together.
Yes.
That idea that it wasn't enough that I just showed up at that school with Little Buck. It was actually that I had Yo-Yo and Aaron and Gabrielle, and we could find a way to do something together that we couldn't do alone. And also, and this is key, respond to a need. What is the need to respond to? And make sure that you're doing that. Think about that once a day. What's the need? I'm going to try and respond to that. And then I think we can all be optimistic at that point.
Absolutely.
So we have a grand total of 3 minutes, 44 seconds.
Go.
So what I suggest we do maybe is we could take 3 questions in a row, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll try and sort through them quickly and give some quick answers. So if you raise your hands, we can go. So we'll go with Joan right here, and then right in the middle, and then right over there. So 1, 2, 3.
I'm not sure this is, now it's on. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much. You talked, Damien, about the spirit of entrepreneurship, and both of you actually have talked about entrepreneurship. And it's, you know, when I was coming up as a dancer, you also talked about the halcyon days of the 70s and 80s, that there was a popularity or support, somehow a surge. That was also the time when the NEA you know, had been founded in 1965, and we were starting to see the dance touring program, and we had all of that kind of support. That said, coming up at that time, you know, I would be, and I know I wasn't alone, in 4 or 5 rehearsals with different companies each day, you know, making it work like that, like young musicians. My
right, it's in
daughter's
our
a professional
DNA.
violinist playing contemporary music. She's doing the same thing, you know, patching it together with teaching and et cetera, right? So it strikes me that entrepreneurship is a muscle, and it can atrophy. In a society, depending on the expectations young people come into the field with, it can atrophy. So how would you suggest we nurture and give tools for entrepreneurship in young artists coming into the field?
Okay. Question 1? I got it.
Sure.
Second question. Yes.
Okay. Actually, I can speak really loudly. Maybe I'll get started. This is kind of like a loaded question.
Okay.
Not really loaded, but it's not gonna always be a one answer thing. But speaking of entrepreneurship, and you just referenced to like having a need and going for it. As a creator, I'm thinking of like, oh my God, there's so many dance companies in New York City. It's out of control. How, and it's only going to increase. How do we make space for all of that? Like, at what point is there too many entrepreneurs? At what point is there too many dance companies? At what point are people of color making pieces about death and like, you know, race and all this stuff? Like, how's there going to be a space for all this in 10, 25 years even? Because, you know, tomorrow, right? Like, how are we going to make space for all of this? Is there space for everyone? Is there still this notion of there's only one at the top, there's only a few at the top? Forget about money. Forget about getting money to do all this stuff. Like, where is this? Is there going to be space for everyone in 5 years?
Okay. And?
Hello.
Hi.
So I had a question just stepping backwards about the composition of this conversation. I just think that since this whole conference is surrounded by this this question of diversity, inclusion, and equity, I don't see a person in this conversation that is perceivably a person of color. So that's my first question about the composition of this conversation. And I think that if you're talking about the future of dance in America, to not have a voice of a person of color is problematic at the very least. So I guess that's a comment. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is when you're thinking about entrepreneurship, are you thinking about it in terms of larger institutions? Because I think I'm from Detroit, so I know about Detroit Jitten, and I know that there has been many entrepreneurs within that particular art form, but it hasn't been recognized by larger institutions. So how do you continue that entrepreneurship that has been outside of institutional support in your perspective?
Okay, great. So 3 questions. Now we're out of time. We're going to do this.
We're going to do it.
Okay. So let me start the last one first because it's such an important question.
I can fight them.
So I will do one thing which, as someone who organizes things, I understand. I don't know how to answer it exactly, but I organize a lot of stuff myself to say that, listen, the organizers made the panel, we were asked to do it, so we're here. That said, I think that this conversation, had we had, I'd love to have another 2 hours and talk about some of the work that needs to be done, or frankly, just talk about my own work. I mean, we can talk about that right now. We can say, so Detroit JIT, when I discovered it, I run a major dance festival, the Vail Dance Festival, and I brought Detroit JIT to my festival and put it on a national stage, and the New York Times reviewed it, and I tried to make sure that that voice was heard, and continue to. And I'm working on a Broadway show right now that is all about dance styles from different cities and how they spring up, in Detroit JIT and Chicago Footwork and on and on and on are all, that's it. That's the language that I want to make sure is heard and understand. And so to go to your other half of your question, or the third of your question about institutional, I think that that is an institution's responsibility. And I may not, at this moment I'm in a particular position that reflects some of the things I said, which is that I'm always collaborating and always trying to do, meaning I don't have one thing. It's basically what it is. But in all of my things, my work has to do with what you're talking about. And then perhaps, well, okay, so I should.
Now, I loved your question, and I loved and appreciated that you brought it up. There should be a person of color here, perceptibly, in a relevant manner to America. I am a multiracial person. You can't necessarily tell. I don't, I wasn't born here, didn't grow up this way, so I embody diversity in a different way that isn't relevant today, right now. And I think it would enrich and make the conversation that much more important and better if we had someone. So I absolutely think that's important and that's key, and it's not to be missed. So there's always a next time. And then also kind of in resonance to what Damon is saying, my entire organization is devoted to issues of representation of Blacks and Latinos in our field. So I think some of the thinking was that it is not also it is not only a perspective of an ally, but also a perspective from a related field that can contribute to the quality of how it is that we view diversity and inclusion. So I think that's kind of where it comes from. But I think unless and until we all think that way and think about how we're representing, we won't move it forward. It'll stay as a surfacey conversation. So I love that you raised it.
Let's pivot to is there room? No. No, I mean, honestly,
We can't leave it unanswered.
There can't be, in a way, because there's only so much, and yet, my level of optimism is that there is an increasing amount of room, and there is actually a time for the voices that you are describing to be heard now more than there were, and there should be, and I think that people of goodwill will make it so. I think that there's so many obstacles. There always were. I mean, I also think that we get preoccupied. I know, I've seen this myself, certainly in my when I was dancing. The things that I was involved in that succeeded or didn't succeed often succeeded or didn't succeed based on, it was never about some of the the prettier aspects of stuff. It literally was about people's commitment and level. And I believe in people's commitment. And I know that that's what pushes things through. So I'm optimistic in that way. And I think it goes back to your question about institutional values, about what people are going to do or not do. And I think that it's up to all of us to push people to do the right thing at every given moment. And I appreciate both of your questions in that spirit as well. I think that's extremely instructive and necessary to hear.
The only thing to add to that, I'm borrowing from a friend of mine from Imani Wins, team up and marry up. If you're doubtful that there is room, collaborate. Get into a space that inspires you and where you feel like what you have to add, which is definitely true. Just because you even can think this way in terms of how much space is there. Collaborate, because if you're thinking that way, you already have something to add that doesn't exist. So I'm totally hopeful.
Yeah, I actually, when you say it that way, the team up part anyway.
Hey, we marry up all the time. Try to get to, you know.
That's exactly how I think about the arts in the larger thing. I am always trying to knock on somebody's door. I am always like, no, we have a
do more
piece in this
together.
conversation. It's not arts and education, it's arts in education. It is a part of it, and if you're not doing arts, you're not doing education, and it is the conversation I am constantly having in every way. And that's a constant. It does not change. But right now, the energy is on our side. It is on our side. Joan, what was that?
How do you nurture entrepreneurship?
Oh.
Teach them early.
I think it's artistic habits of mind. My friend, happily colleague, Howard Gardner, education guru, wrote the theory of multiple intelligences, that we all have within us different ways that we learn, and that we have to find those pathways in. And every child has a different way to learn, and every adult and every person has a different way to understand and learn. And then when you take that as a whole, and he described what goes on, he described artistic habits of mind. I think if you teach multiple intelligences and you teach artistic habits of mind, like that idea of retrenching on something and going back and nurturing it and rewriting a script or making a little dance, I think it's about creativity, and it's about teaching creativity, and it's the same thing. It is exactly that. I think you have those opportunities at every given moment to step back and go, why did you do that? Wait, what was that choice about? And you go back. That's the same thing. And then you say, take that one step further. I once, tried to learn how to direct. Well, I was in a show that was a theater show, and I'm so used to being in dance shows. And the director said to the actor next to me, try something different. And I was like, wow, you didn't tell him what to do. I was like, oh, that's how they do it in acting. I was like, oh, I'm so used to being told what to do in a funny way. You take a page out of that. Try something different. Try something different.
And I feel pretty passionately about this one. I think I agree with you, it is about teaching. I think it's about teaching early. It's about normalizing what entrepreneurship means, not making it into some crazy science, but in fact, teaching it in such a manner that makes it practical for kids at a young age. And ultimately, I really believe in teaching artists being right there in the classroom and practitioners being the ones who teach, so that we move, however politely I can say it, we move decidedly away from theorizing about entrepreneurship and actually teaching how it's done. And I bet it'll work.
The final question I'd say, and this relates to probably all of it, is that we have lessons to learn from everything around us. We do. They're everywhere. And part of my life in the last years has been on arts policy and working on the ideas of the arts in the middle of all of it through the Aspen Institute, where I run a program. And I've gotten to meet unbelievable people doing extraordinary things, but very few have impressed me as much as there's a woman named Kiran Sethi who created something called Design for Change in India. And it was grown out of the belief that we all, if we use design theory, will make a better world around us. And it started with asking children how to design their own school. Couldn't figure out what was happening with this. And the kids learned design theory, steps of design theory of creating.
That's awesome.
It changed everything. And now 25 million kids around the world do it. It's an extraordinary thing. There's always something else to learn out there from a related field. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Wonderful. And with that, Damien, thank you so much. We are really over. Let's thank our panelists. This was fantastic.